Hello, good evening. Hello, good evening. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on when you're watching this. Just trying to set up the stream here. I had to do an update, and I just want to verify sound and lag. All right, so it looks like we're okay. All right, good. That lag is pretty terrible. All right. So I'm just going to do a live reading of another document that I found here in the CIA's CREST library. And the CIA CREST library, for anybody who's not familiar with it, is a Freedom of Information request library. And a lot of the videos that I've already shared generally have centralized around like ESP, telepathy, the CIA Stargate program, Center Lane, Gateway, Gondola Wish, Dragoon Absorb. There's a few other ones in there, a couple of other names that have slipped my mind at this point. This document here is only 3 pages, and what I want to read is looks like a correspondence between 2 physicians. Now I don't know if the physicians were actually working for the CIA or that they were part of the CIA, and while they had their civilian jobs, they sent this to an analyst or something, or however it works, or that this document was intercepted by the CIA. But this one here sort of loosely touches on how electromagnetic fields and VHF, ELF, anything that really revolves on the spectrum of light. So all frequencies of energy that relate to electromagnetic fields are basically, or essentially, just variations of the field of light, the spectrum of light. Some can be visible, some are not visible, and that's really the only difference. The jargon that we hear in different trade industries and groups like 5G or EMF or VHF or VLF or microwave, they're all essentially on the same spectrum. They just have different properties once you tap into that spectrum. And this is between Mr. Robert P. Gao, president of Develco Inc. or Develco Inc. Now, I've already looked up this company, and they're still around, but they're now headquartered in Denmark. They have a couple satellite offices in the United States. At the time that this was written in 1973, on May 30th, they were headquartered in Mountain View, California. And it's a letter to him from W. Ross Adey, MD. And you can look his name up. He's actually got some papers and some research on a website called Microwave News now, or something like that. Actually, we'll just look it up real quick before I go start. So Microwave News, somebody's already probably looked up this guy already. Looks like he's on a website called CIA Mind Control History. Let's look up Microwave News, though, because this is the one that I was referencing. So he died in '82. He was a towering figure in EMF, ELF, RF signals, Brain Research Institute at the University of California. So it doesn't say that he was associated with the CIA, but someone at the CIA apparently sent this in to be reviewed. That's what this routing slip here is. The routing slips are basically in '73. before everything was electronic, you would literally have an inbox on your desk or an assistant with an inbox, and they would pass these documents around and you'd have to sign or initial it. And it looks like he signed it in 73 here. And they've crossed out the name, so we don't know whose desk this was actually on. It doesn't look like it was on Ross Adey's, and it doesn't look like it was on Robert P. Gow's. But I'm going to go ahead and read through this. You can always fast forward or come back at a later time and check this out. Dear Bob, I am responding to your letter of May 24th and to the enclosed draft of your general letter of proposal. As indicated in your draft, I had promised an overview of our work relevant to this proposal, and I apologize for my remissness in not sending it to you sooner. Let me first set a structural and functional frame for the brain and central nervous system, which will be brief enough yet sufficiently explicit to allow interpretation of what follows by any competent communications engineer. This is a frame that has grown up in great degree from our own research. It will thus have a strong color attributable to our group and in some degree will be non-classical and will still lack acceptance by some prestigious neurobiologists. Nevertheless, there is an increasing body of opinion from respected leaders in neurobiological research, particularly those involved in molecular biology and neurochemistry, who see the need for a substantial updating in our accepted view of brain organization. This later view is now appearing because of the increasing tide of observations on brain organization for which classical explanations are inadequate. First, a functional sensitivity of the human central nervous system has been demonstrated in several laboratories to very weak electric fields in air where those fields are oscillating at brainwave frequencies. The strength of the fields is of the order of 25, I believe that's megavolts, possibly, I'll have to look that up, per centimeter, and the effects include altered reaction times, altered subjective estimates of the passage of time, and alterations in daily body rhythms, including body temperature cycles and sleep-wakefulness cycles. Part of this work has been done in our laboratory. We have also tested the effects of VHF fields with some electric intensity. In animals, these fields are potent in modifying states of sleep and wakefulness, and in modifying specific internal brain rhythms that represent or are associated with behavioral responses. The VHF field studies showed an absence of effect with unmodulated fields, and selective effects with different modulating frequencies between 3 and 16 Hertz. The emphasis on these functional interactions has been to be in terms of their very weak strength. For example, the total current induced by the low frequency fields in the head of a monkey is slightly less than 1 nanoampere. If we compare the electric gradient in the tissue with that producing actual synaptic depolarization, it is almost 11 orders of magnitude less. For these reasons, classical synaptic physiology cannot be adduced as an explanation for these phenomena. For that reason, much molecular biology and biophysical research has been directed to possible ways in which nerve cells may sense changes in their environment without invoking classical theories of synaptic activation. It is feasible that the surface of nerve cell membranes may act as transducers for extremely weak chemical and electrical influences through the sensitivity of a charged sheet of glue-like molecules covering the cell surface. Such a role has already been proven for sensitivity to hormones and drugs that alter nerve cell action in extremely small concentrations. This is the most radical aspect of the changed anatomy and physiology now being hypothesized and tested to explain these interactions. I turn now to the future from the viewpoint that these preliminary studies indicate a feasibility to manipulate and control brain states by modification of the environmental electromagnetic atmosphere. First, a long-range research program is much needed to specify in much greater degree than has been possible to date the precise mode of interaction of the nerve cell with these weak environmental influences. There is thus a very important class of problems in the biophysics of membrane transducing. A second and equally important class of problems concerns the way in which groups of nerve cells may interact with each other so that their summed behavior is modified by such weak influences. Both classes of processes, molecular on the one hand and as a neuronal population characteristic on the other, probably involve interactions classed as cooperative in the terminology of physicists. Work in this area is only beginning in terms of biological models and an eventual evaluation of biological interactions. Progress will be slow, but the significance is so great that a program of this kind should be framed to allow at least 5 years of concerted effort with relatively few fruits of a reportable kind in the initial years. This point must be emphasized in an age when short-term rewards are almost a sine qua non for the program manager. On the other hand, it should be emphasized that promoters of this program are not seeking a fishing license just to pursue a dilettante interest. From the foregoing, it seems clear that there are possibilities for a whole range of modulations and modifications of human behavioral patterns based on the interactions with a wide variety of environmental health fields. To this time, work has focused on quite simplistic aspects of carrier frequency selection and on equally simple modulation patterns that have been selected on an arbitrary basis with the spectrum of non-brain wave activity. We may anticipate a substantive increase in capability through carefully planned research on frequency selections. The outcome is likely to be an optimizing of states of attention with increased learning capability, or the reduction in levels of awareness and an induction of sleep states. It is highly likely that this type of manipulation can have therapeutic significance in achieving desired changes in widespread medical problems such as insomnia and endocrine disorders such as menstrual irregularity. Less clear to me at this time, but perhaps no less feasible, will be detection of bioelectric and biomagnetic phenomena at a distance from the subject without the need for contact electrodes. Already work in cryomagnetometry has yielded important new capabilities in monitoring heart and brain function. Within the established theoretical sensitivity of the Josephine junction technique lie many physiological parameters from which an assessment of subject states may well be possible. Current research in this field has been limited by the funding available for research in the needed instrumentation. Until basic laboratory techniques have been well enough evaluated, little or nothing can be done in development of instrumentation for field use. Also, in the forefront of serious problems for the method currently is its susceptibility to environmental electrical magnetic pollution. Much will surely be done if funding is available to improve the differential sensitivity to the important biological signals. Again, in this prospective view of needed monitoring instrumentation is the prospect that advances will be slow, and the needed effort must be extremely dedicated if we are to succeed at all. Yet I have no doubt that these goals can be achieved if adequate support is forthcoming. I hope that this overview, though lengthy, will give you a perspective on what I genuinely believe to be possible as the next step in highly important medical monitoring systems. Their social significance is likely to eclipse all previous developments in medical instrumentation. The time to begin is now, and progress will surely be slow. I hope that these opinions will assist you in completing your documentation. With best regards, sincerely, the doctor. So, I mean, there's going to be some alarming words in there for most people. Let me just click back to, what do I got a warning for here? I'm not worried about the resolution just yet. So I think if you caught any of this and you were able to decipher any of it quickly, let me just go back to that underlined word. So the Josephine junction here is in reference to scalar waves, and scalar waves are typically, I should say typically among the conspiratorial crowd or researchers within electromagnetic stuff and electrostatic stuff, is what they would consider Tesla's death ray, that was actually a scalar wave weapon. And in the CIA library you find anything related to scalar is actually, there's no defense against it. There's no wall, no metal, no composite materials, at least nothing that's in the freely available, publicly available information. None of those documents exist, and in some cases, there's even a lieutenant colonel who says we don't know how to defend against it at all. He says that its scalar attacks are even more detrimental than an EMF attack. So now to go back up to the brain modification states, the lack of sleep, inducing sleep, accelerated learning or making it harder for people to concentrate, things like that. I turn now to the future from the viewpoint that these preliminary studies indicate a feasibility to manipulate and control brain states by modification of the environmental electromagnetic atmosphere. Now we make a couple correlations too with what they're using for weather modification and weather control. I don't think that's a large leap, and I don't think it's a large leap to just simply say cell phones, 5G, 2G. 2G is referenced also in the CIA's CREST library, but they use a technical term which is known as millimeter waves, and that research has a lot of negative side effects as well, which is everything from blood boiling, which could be, I guess, attributed to a type of microwave effect, as well as lowering sperm counts. So all these myths that I've spent 2 or 3 years like reading on websites that most people would say it's just paranoid people putting up ideas, and in some cases it is, because they don't provide any resources, they don't provide links, they don't provide references, so it does a disservice to their own website that they are really just being alarmist about it and not providing anything to back it up. And with that said, let me just jump over to Twitter here. I'm sure everyone's familiar with Twitter. If you ever want to just search someone's field individually, you just go to their field and say, do it just like I did up there. And the reason why I'm pulling this up is because I have a lot of my research on this field for now, or in this account. So this is from the, I don't know if you can see this image here. This document is freely available on the NASA's website. So they've done research, and I believe this document looks like 1980. So we have this document here from 1973 and this document here from 1980. They're not saying 5G. They're not going to say VLF, ELF, or VHF rather, ELF, electromagnetic or anything like that. Every one of them has a variation of jargon where what they do is they isolate the energy form on the spectrum and then give it a new name. And that could be everything from light, which we call, UV, which is UV is ultraviolet light, but you're basically microwaving yourself under the radiation of the sun. That's all that is. You're crisping your skin. But NASA did a lot of research already, and here they termed it microwave. So whatever your thoughts are on space and spatial exploration, that's sort of irrelevant right now. But if we even look at the suits that those people wear when astronauts or astronauts, depending on what your perspective is, I'm sure that those suits are more than just keeping them warm as it relates to the atmospheric change in wherever they are, whatever they're exploring. Change in blood protein chemistry, chromosome changes in human leukocytes. There are some other documents where they explicitly point out that it will change. Here we go. It will change. So this is a NASA document, but that it will change DNA. It can alter DNA. So vibration, light, radiation, all kinds of things can change your DNA, and that has to include the technologies that we're deploying now in some fashion or another. I think the real important point for me, without going too far off on these other tangents, is that most of my research was centrally focused on ESP, telepathy, psychokinesis, just because I have my own personal experiences with those. If you've watched any of the videos that I've published, I've expounded a little bit on some of those experiences and some of the ideas. But I've also On the opposite end of technology, I've also done a lot of research on the occult aspects of ascension, the Christos, the Christ spirit. Most ancient texts and sacred texts, religious texts, whether it's the Bible or the Quran or Qui-Gong or Bankai, Japanese, or shamanism or anything like that, even down to some of the secret societies or things that we call secret societies like Masonry, all of them at the pinnacle of what they discuss, it's about awakening, whether you call it the third eye or awakening all of your inner abilities. So all of the degrees and the initiates and all that thing, all those things that people go through are in some way an old throwback to what the Egyptians would do in order to qualify someone morally and ethically to be a bearer, right? To bear the crown, which is the idea that your brain is illuminated, a light emanates from your brain, but to bear and wear the crown of that gift. And I'm sure with a lot of that too, we get things like schizophrenia and people seeing and hearing voices that they shouldn't hear. Even though today we know that technology exists within the military and the army to also induce those same types of experiences, it's to bring it up is the reason why I brought it up is because if we go to the CIA Crest Library and essentially what I found and discovered was that despite the CIA actually participating in Project Stargate and doing all this work, there's 30,000 documents here essentially, and the money I would roughly say is about the budgets from 1975 to 2001 it looked to me about $40 million just, and these were both contractors, private corporate contractors that the CIA hired, as well as doing their own research internally. But what I found is that there's also CIA documents of NSA documents, which are dated, they're almost 10 years earlier than any of the CIA research. And the CIA or the NSA's documents, in their documents, and you can read some of the videos that I've or listen to some of the videos that I posted earlier or in the past year, but their documents, they are essentially saying we shouldn't let people do this unless they're morally fit. We know it exists. If you've done any research into the intelligence agencies, including the military, the Army, the DIA, whether they are religious fanatics or militant patriots, whatever term you want to use, it's kind of irrelevant. Just leave the labels behind for now. We're just talking about the people that are in control of these programs. If you've done your research on the founding of these organizations, most people will say, hey, they were originally the OSS, and the OSS was a makeup of German scientists and German research. And everyone will sort of loosely know that the Nazis were involved in occult research. Some people are somewhat familiar with the fact that the CIA and NSA also, at certain levels in their whatever their position is, they receive occult training as well. And then if you're just someone who's a devout religious person, whether it's an esoteric text or an exoteric text, you know that your books, whatever book it is that you worship, is in its own way, it's providing you a certain occult knowledge. And all of those knowledge, that stuff existed from the 1700s and 1800s on. It used to be publicly published in newspapers. There were a lot of research papers and a lot of scientists and people out in the public and the open just, trying to really bring telepathy and ESP and all that stuff to the mass consciousness, but it somehow got wrapped up in like parapsychology and things like that, and was sort of given a bad name by all the hucksters and the people who were capitalizing on the ignorance of the masses by really more or less performing stage magic or stagecraft and things like that. But all of them are familiar with it. They're all taught it. So despite the CIA having all this Project Stargate and the DIA taking on Grill Flame and Center Lane and all the and Gateway Program and all this other stuff, we know that Masonry was centrally at certain degrees. Architecture and sound were designed to induce psychic states, as well as astral projection and things like that. Some of the alchemical processes themselves are metaphors. While they're referencing metal and gold, what they did is they layered it so that it's also talking. It's like the word transmutation is applicable to materials, the human body, like the physical human body, and also the human spirit. So that's sort of their trinity. There is that it's layered on all those levels, and some people only just went to the material aspects of it. Some people went to the biological or the physical, and some people took the spiritual, the mental. But they all sort of have to work. You kind of have to have all the knowledge for it to work all at once, or to awaken your senses all at once, because some people are just using their eyes, some people are just pushing themselves physically, some people are maybe they're doing fasting or meditation with sound and vibration and things like that. But the idea of all your senses being awoken always seems to sort of fall back on the eyes, and that's the image we're actually shown a lot of times in the occult knowledge. But it's everything. It's your ears, right? It's your eyes, it's your skin, it's just being totally aware and awakened. But with that comes a big curse, because if you're not built, or you haven't built yourself up to be able to intake all that stuff all at once, it's going to cause you a lot of distress too. But the NSA was ultimately tasked with countermeasures to it. And since the NSA and CIA are typically known to be made up or comprised of Nazi scientists, for whatever reason, a lot of the historical books and things written about that will tell you things like the NSA or the Nazis. They would never release a weapon of any kind. They would never release a weapon of any kind without a countermeasure to it, right? Because if it fell into the wrong hands, they'd have to put it down, shut it down as quickly as possible. So in like the 60s, the 50s and 60s, the NSA was actually already working on this stuff, and their countermeasures actually include, let's see if we can find it here. Their countermeasures actually include ionization of the atmosphere, negative and positive ionization. There we go, I found it on the first try there. So streaming this tends to somehow suck up all my RAM, so I'm going to have to slow it down for a minute and just free up a little bit of RAM. You might get a little jig or a jog in the video. So let's give it 1 second while it performs a quick cleanup. Still lagging a little bit there. So with these countermeasures, they were even implying things like physical stress, mental stress. The best way to keep a telepath or a person who's good at ESP or remote viewing is just day-to-day stress. Ionization of the atmosphere, both positive and negative, have effects on the adept's ability to read and okay, yeah, so cryptological aspects of ESP, and this is an NSA document. So it's NSA RDP, and you can see it on a previous screen. Just rewind if you want to look at the number. 1968. I'm going to scroll through just to the table of contents. Now, I actually did a reading of all this. That reading is probably one of the first readings I've done. It's a little hard to go through because I went pretty slow. But you can always use the speed up feature on the YouTube video player to go through a little bit quicker. But we have defense against ESP, the potential threat of PK to ComSec. Now PK is psychokinesis. Just a quick little historical like story or anecdote about that is a lot of this research into remote viewing, or we'll just call it PK, was started by the Navy and the Air Force, and the reason is because under duress and stress, pilots and people would often experience a lot of odd mechanical failures that could not be repeated later or could not be understood. And if you're familiar with the term gremlins, like where a gremlin just messes something up or breaks something, or makes something unexpected happen, or bad luck, whatever you want to call it, that's where all that sort of came from. It was them experiencing these failures with their equipment that they were not, they just couldn't explain. And so whoever was doing this, or whoever initiated this research initially in the Navy, most likely did not have any familiarity with any of the initiate schools or the mastery school stuff, and went to it through a more pragmatic method of or scientific inquiry. At the same time, the we'll say the older version of the Germans, we'll call them the Ottomans. There's a lot of those old books around. I don't know how easy they are to find online, but they have an interesting library and repertoire of research that essentially is predicated on what we might call medieval or archaic methods of inducing an adept to exhibit their abilities. And that's basically around torture, stress, and creating some sort of traumatic experience in order to get the young person, and it is a young person usually who goes through it, to exhibit these abilities. They even went as far as that if there were negative side effects for the person as they got older, they even had backup research on that as well. And I don't know how to really frame that or reference that in a positive context. I know it sounds negative, but I haven't. I don't. It's a tough thing to talk about for some people, because I know a lot of people have suffered all kinds of experiences in their life that have made them angry or upset or hard to forget and get over things. But these types of programs are referenced today even in our pop culture through X-Men and things like that, where we have a group of teenagers who are experiencing changes in their pubescent lives, and mom and dad don't want to let them out, or something happens to them, or whatever it is to set them off, and they unleash their mutant ability accidentally and either kill someone or hurt someone, and then they have to go off to a special school, the Xavier School in Xavier, and they begin their training in how to control their powers and stuff. So with all that sort of said, this potential threat to PK, this defense, you can read through all this or go through the videos, however you want to do it. I'm not going to go through it on this specific the stream right now. But I think we can make some assertions at least. I mean, it's fair to say that at any given time there were 2 or 3 groups, no matter how large or small they were, right? No matter what their level of authority was within the agencies and the intelligence groups or in the military apparatus. They were aware of countermeasures to making people, I guess, awaken or fall asleep again, depending on whatever they exhibited and whatever the intelligence agencies felt were there, if they were morally and ethically equipped to move forward. And I think we can surmise that whatever's happening with the technology today, and whatever's been going on for 50 years at least, with vaccines and the market of, say, like vitamins and supplements, and the CIA's association with bringing pharmacology and narcotics and things like that into the mass consciousness around the 50s, 60s, and 70s. you have a couple groups here. You have a couple groups who are trying to get everybody to exhibit it and give everybody the opportunity. You have a couple groups who are trying to keep people from doing it. And then we have a technological net, or a biological fence or net that was being conceptualized and developed in order to track people. And what I mean by track people is that if they were able to, in '73, talk about the detection of the bioelectric and biomagnetic phenomena at a distance. I mean, if we really think this was about the menstrual irregularity, like if we really think that that's what these two physicians were discussing, or that the reason why the CIA intercepted this document was to help with menstrual irregularity, then we're this video is not going to convince you of anything. I mean, if that's what you believe from these types of documents. At the same time, I'm not going to, say these guys are all villains, because I don't. As many of the documents that I've read that are like this, I've also read some really great papers and interesting research that I don't think could come from villains. It's possible that not everybody knows what everybody else was doing, and like I said, there's no there's no clear trail on names of who was associated with what. On the political side, there is George Bush, Reagan. A lot of the presidents were briefed on this stuff. There's a couple senators who were briefed. The intelligence committees, they were obviously signing and approving budgets for this kind of stuff, so they would have to be briefed on it. You can actually find some of those presentation slides that they had given to any number of people within the Senate and Congress, as well as the president and vice president as well. So it's potentially true that the Star Wars program that Reagan was famous for might have had some relationship to this stuff. I don't know. I don't know if it's just really shooting down missiles and things like that. Then okay, I guess. But since I can find that this research has been going on since the '50s by the supposed geniuses and intelligence apparatus of the United States government, and I say United States government for a specific reason, because within that research is also all of their research that they partnered with Japan, China, and Russia. So they're not the only government that was involved in this research. And a lot of this research did come from Russia earlier on. So Russia was doing it and is fully aware of it. And the term Pavlovian, if you've ever heard that, which comes from the doctor and researcher Pavlov, a lot of his research, much like what the myth of the Nazis has been sort of bastardized and turned inward. Where when I've read a lot of his research, he doesn't look like he was on any mission to control people or hurt people. He was literally trying to understand certain things, and maybe I'm being very idealistic and giving these people credit where they don't deserve it. But I don't see villains on every corner of this research. So I'm not saying this is a all-encompassing, I don't know, mass conspiracy or whatever, but I know that a lot of the things that people experience with the technology today, in terms of anything from skin trails to hearing voices or perceiving sounds, ringing in the ears, things like that, all of those are part of the side effects as well as the countermeasures that the NSA was tasked with creating. Another interesting sort of side note, since I know not a lot of people are researchers into the Stargate programs and things like that, is it, to me, as I read through a lot of this stuff, and it's been a couple years now, it's clear that the program was sort of sabotaged from the inside out, where all of a sudden funding disappeared and it just sort of stopped. Congress stopped wanting to participate in it, and they didn't want to give anybody any money, which could mean it just went black and went dark, or they had gotten so far in their advancements that they didn't need to really document this or keep this on the books anymore. I don't know, but it's clear that that stuff exists, and I think that we have to take a little bit of this seriously, or more serious, in terms of what's being deployed in terms of technology and what everyone is perceiving to be a benefit versus a dependency. It's also quite possible that it's a mass experiment, and like releasing drugs into the population, maybe it's possible that the technology is meant to help or facilitate the transformation in people. I don't know. I don't see that, because I've actually had some negative side effects from this stuff, and in my research and doing all this and trying to go public with it and post it on Twitter and share it with other people. Everything from my computer going down to my phone's ringing off the hook, all kinds of ridiculous stuff. I mean, including even having bank accounts shut down for no reason, to where I actually tried to call the bank and get it taken care of. They just sent me to an IT person and said, we terminated it. We terminated your account. So whatever the NSA was doing, or whatever the CIA is doing, or the DIA, or the DOD, or the Army, because the Army was as involved as well. You can find a lot of stuff from the Army's Surgeon General signing off on human use experiment stuff and things like that. But there has to be a correlation with the technology that's being deployed and has been deployed for the past, say, 30, 40 years, as well as with, I don't know, vaccines, I guess, and some of the physical issues that babies are born with. Who knows? I don't know. I can't make that correlation. I've done some research in the vaccine stuff, and there are a lot of interesting correlations, but the most dangerous stuff I've actually found always comes back around to the microwave, the radio, the EMF, the VHF, and all that stuff. There's a lot of research as well that's publicly available on the government's website as it relates to how harmful these signals are. So if the telecom industries and telecom companies and phone companies aren't telling people, it's not because they don't have to. Meaning, like, if you actually go through your terms of agreement and terms of service for, say, your iPhone or your Android or whatever, it tells you right in there not to keep the phone next to your head. So for whatever reason, it doesn't tell you why not to keep it there, but it says you shouldn't keep your phone next to your head for that long. So, and there's plenty of research, and I know there's a lot of physicians and doctors who've actually gone public online on YouTube and posted videos of their own research. But even aside from that, just the fact, okay, that it's dangerous, fine. Okay, we know it's dangerous, but why is it even being implemented in the first place? That would be the question. And I think the question comes down to is that if we go through the research that's available on the CIA's website, once you've dug down deep enough, you find that they themselves and Russia and a lot of other, let's call them state agencies, all admit that it's most likely everyone is capable of doing this stuff, and that for whatever reason, through psychological issues, stress, not paying attention, or being too focused on certain things unrelated to what this is, or not even let's say being an initiate in the sacred knowledge of honing your skills of ESP and telepathy, but they would call us idiots or Luddites, but everyone's capable. And if the intelligence agencies actually felt like people were going to guess cryptographic keys and guess the whereabouts of secret bases and things like that, how hard do you think that would be in an era of the Red Scare, right? The McCarthy era. Now we've got the COVID-19 stuff, and don't talk like. How easy would it be for these intelligence agencies to go in front of Congress, if they even had to go in front of Congress, and get an approval to implement this kind of technology? We're just gonna run a few low-level waves all day and keep everybody buzzing along without thinking too much beyond what they're hired to do or what they're paid to do, because that's essentially what this paper alludes to, as well as, I would say, at least another 50 different papers within this CIA Crest library that show not only that brain entrainment is possible, but also brain manipulation, moving your body without your knowledge, like a twitch or things like twitches and I know. Let me put a caveat on that. I realize that things with age or fatigue, your body can go through certain things, and you'll experience certain phenomena that you're not familiar with because it's literally new. But what they're talking about in their own research papers are not talking about age. They're talking about telepathy, ESP, psychic ability, and deterring it in anyone at any given point whenever they want. And that includes what they called war theater. Now, we might call that false flags, but things like stress and I don't know, psychological trauma. The legal term for it is intentional infliction of emotional distress. Like, you can look that up. That's IIED, intentional infliction of emotional distress. If that's what we're looking at here, then it's, let's say, the fence, the farm. The fence is much broader and much bigger than most people think. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with, say, population control or anything like that. And further to that point of population control, I'm pretty sure that they've done blood work on these people, right? Any of these Army people, CIA agents, NSA agents, a lot of these people who exhibit these abilities, say, in stronger levels or quantities, what they call potentials or talents, as they would call it. They didn't say adepts, but they would say potentials or talents. I'm sure that there's research into the biological aspects of those people's lives in possibly breeding a super soldier type thing and all that stuff, which again sort of correlates with the X-Men stuff and the pre-programming of radioactive spider bites and gamma radiation and people being exposed to radiation and their physiology being altered in various ways. And then, even if you don't want to believe in the CIA research or the NSA research or the DIA research, you have hundreds and hundreds of books from the, say, 1000 BC and up, and sacred texts and things like that all sort of reference the same thing, which is awakening your crown. The crown above your head is the light, the ring, the angelic ring. In Hinduism and Brahmism, you have the chakras. In China, you have the flow state, the Qigong, and all these are different aspects of the same phenomena within each person. So even if they were looking for a biological component, it appears that doesn't matter what race you are. And I think in some aspects too, there's a little bit of data. I'm sure there's actually a lot of data. It's just not publicly available on the website yet, or if it will ever be. But there's a little bit of data that you could sort of infer is showing that there's even some races of people that are going to be stronger or more prolific with the ability. And it's quite possible that the mass rollout of all these technologies all the time so quickly would at least show that there is a controlling group within every aspect of the government or the intelligence agencies that is responsible for making sure that nobody develops outside of the scope of their, let's say, their program, right? What are we at here with this time? Was this 48 minutes? All right, so 48 minutes. I'm going to stop this here. I would encourage whoever does get to see this, if it's seen or heard, to just keep going through some of this information. Like I said, NASA has the research available for electromagnetic fields and millimeter waves, 2G, as it was referenced during those research periods. And the CIA has plenty of it. So to sort of summarize this up and put a cap on it all, it looks like a mass deterrent to keeping anybody from developing or using their abilities without the permission. And if they do exhibit those abilities, they can sort of they can see you pop up on a screen, right? I mean, if we have heat vision and night goggles and TSA scanners, and you can go onto Amazon.com right now and excuse me, find an Aura camera, a cheap Aura camera, or you have an Xbox that can, or a Wii gaming console that can track your movements of your body through light and sound from the console. What do we think we have on a larger scale from a military application standpoint? And where do you even think those technologies came from? It's not all private sector. It's not all just Nintendo inventing all this stuff or Apple inventing all this stuff. They've all themselves licensed a ton of patents that come from different universities, including what appears to me to be Mountain View, California, which is the central hub of all myths of Silicon Valley. And this is the University of California in Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, Santa Cruz, San Diego, Riverside, Irvine, Berkeley. And some people who've done research in the CIA will tell you that Berkeley was a hive of CIA recruitment. Underlining all that, you have your sororities and fraternities who may or may not have experienced sort of the ritual initiation processes on some lower level as they were going through college. They may not be top level Rosicrucians or Masons or Illuminati, whatever, whichever organization you want to pick. The Oculus, the Nines, the Magic 12, Majestic 12, whatever groups that these people are a part of. After 3 or 4 years of research with publicly available information on the intelligence agency's own websites, it's clear to me that there's a tracking and monitoring mechanism for people that exhibit this stuff. And, if we look to outside of this entire lens of parapsychology and ESP and telepathy, we have what the president is, the president of the United States right now is sort of battling with, and he often brings up is the child trafficking, the sex trafficking stuff, and I can't help but think that there's a correlation there in some fashion or another. Where are the kids? I mean, are we really, with all this research and all this stuff that I have up on screen right now, are we really supposed to believe that the controlling figures are just sexual deviants and really their only purpose and their only initiative at all is to get off on a child or something like that? Like, there's got to be a little bit more here, especially when we have occult research, we have intelligence research, we have secret fraternity research, we have secret society research that shows that a lot of young people who exhibit this stuff early on are immediately initiated in some fashion or another into learning how to hone their abilities, and if they don't qualify morally or ethically and sort of pass the Gospels, so to speak, which is basically like suffer as the Father has suffered in order to know the glory of the Father. It's likely that I think there's a mixed parallel construction of ideas here, and it's not to belittle the ongoing and actually true child trafficking and sex trafficking that does occur, absolutely. But I wouldn't doubt that there is some sort of hidden recruitment program, or if the CIA is 2 or 3 million people strong and the NSA is 4 or 5 million people strong right now, and you've got some police departments like the NYPD that's, I don't know, 70,000 people just for one city. You're going to have a lot of agents, right? The FBI was involved in this research as far back as the 50s. They were being briefed by Alan Dulles from the CIA. There's going to be groups of people and pockets of people who are still either aware of how to track and actually identify these types of people, or there's just going to be fully established, let's say, contingents within these large government apparatuses whose entire purpose is to find people and recruit people and make them a part of the whatever's their, I don't know. I know there's the idea of the secret space program and the breakaway civilizations, and that could be entirely true too. I don't hold any negative or positive reactions to it. I think that a lot of things are possible, and if you're someone who's gone through this research or sort of lived a full life in some capacity, you realize a lot is possible in a 30 or 40 year span of someone's life if they're active or participating actively in things like that in society as a whole. And then when you look at what the CIA invented and the NSA invented in a matter of a couple years, just whether it be a photocopier or the internet itself, which was also I know that we hear that the DARPA or the Department of Defense invented the internet, or in some cases we hear the Navy was participating in that. You can find the declassified research in here from the CIA showing they were working on a email system and an internet as early as the 70s as well. So it could be a situation where the intelligence groups simply just task each other with help. They share resources among each other and they say, look, we need this to do this, and we need a lens that we can fly on a camera on an airplane that flies 500 miles an hour, and we got to be able to take pictures, and it's got to be, so they invent something and they figure it out. As in the same breath, it's like, hey, we want to breed oranges that don't have seeds. Can you guys make that happen? And I'm sure that they have. So whether or not you want to look at the idea of a second or secret space program or a breakaway civilization as a negative thing, I don't think it would be negative unless they were abusing us with this technology. And that's I think that's the real contention here overall, is that it's clear that while in some cases it's communicated they want to use these tools to identify the psychic phenomena among people, it's also clear that we have these tools deployed that are clearly harming certain people and creating a lot of illness among the population. So, all right, I'm going to end this here, and I will come back with, I think, what do I want to reference next time here? I might do another stream after this. I'm just not sure which document I should go into, because the secret, I'm running out of space here. Okay, so that was the NSA stuff. Let me just find, or NASA rather. No, that's not it. Oh, here's another, just to show you. Subjective effects on persons working in radio frequency electromagnetic fields, 1978. Headaches, eye strain, fatigue, dizziness, disturbed sleep at night, sleeplessness in daytime, moodiness, irritability, unsociability, hypochondriac reactions, feelings of fear, nervous tension, mental depression, memory impairment, pulling sensation in the scalp and brow, loss of hair, pain in muscle and heart region, breathing difficulties, increased perspiration of extremities, difficulty with sex life. And then just look at the top here again, that's a NASA government file in its archive, and that document is electromagnetic field interactions with the human body, observed effects and theories. So, if you don't want to buy into my biofence, geofence, let's block all people from using their psychic ability and talents, their inborn, innate talents, that's fine, but at least check out the 5G, the 2G, the millimeter waves, the radio, the VHF, VLF, ELF, really anything. And it's possible. I think what happens for most people on a day-to-day basis is, I've worked in agency environments where they have ionization atmosphere, ventilators, and noise reducers, and all this technology inside the agency that's designed to make the area, the entire experience of working in the office more peaceful. And that may be well true, but at the same time, I don't think it's fair that the rest of the populace should be subject to these technologies without any protection. But what I was going to say was that I think even people on drugs, smoking weed all day, or coming into work smoking cigarettes, or they're caffeinated all the time, and a lot of those are those effects from those things are going to make the ability to recognize, like, caffeine and sugar will give you a lot of the same things that were related to the EMF, and no one would know the difference. And what happened in the mid 80s all the way up, through the mid 90s, Starbucks skyrocketed to being larger than McDonald's at one point. It was larger and generating more revenue than McDonald's was. So whether or not it's deliberate or not, whether or not that there's a parallel construction going on, or now all of a sudden we have CBD oils and marijuana sort of being propagated in the political realm, even, as far up as the president himself mentioning it, and in Congress and Senate having things come across their desk related to it. There's clear that there is a group somewhere who's much more in the know than, say, I don't know, whatever medical doctors, whatever authority is adamantly saying, hey, this stuff doesn't hurt you. It's not. It's just ridiculous. It doesn't work. It's not true. It's not. That doesn't happen. I mean, all the research is right here. So if anybody in the professional industry says that they don't know how to do the research, they can't find it, they haven't done it, we just deployed it, haven't done it, it's ridiculous for us to think that they don't already have, somebody in those companies doesn't have the knowledge about what this stuff does to people. And I myself, I've gone through a ton of different experiences where I know that technology was being used on me, and I don't want to bring all that stuff up because it dissuades a little bit from what you can actually read here with your own eyes, right? So without me having to be anecdotal or tell stories or reference my own life to where it becomes just this guy saying something, you have research from NASA, you have research from the CIA, you have research from the NSA that essentially qualifies up to, from what I can see, a $40 million, $50 million budget. Sometimes up, if I were really to go far and try to stretch what I've read and put it all into one budget, it would be $80 million over the past 30 or 40 years, starting from the 50s through to 2001. It would be up to upwards of $80 million invested in this stuff. So I don't know. I think we have to figure out a way how to circulate this a little bit more and get this out to other people. And then not even, like I said, not painting the CIA or NSA or all these people as just bad guys all the time, because I don't think that's helpful, and I don't even think it's true. But like I said, this stuff is all, as far as telepathy and ESP, is all documented and codified and cryptographic, right? The word cryptographic doesn't mean ones and zeros. It's cryptographic. It's a visual. It's a, whether it be language or symbols, it's cryptographic. That's where that term comes from. It's not, it doesn't have anything to do with code or anything like that. It's just been, programmers have just sort of borrowed that word. But all of our sacred texts, whether you're a Christian or Jewish or Muslim or whatever, they all, interestingly enough, they all have their own variations of getting people to look into this aspect or to recognize that, like the Earth's magnetic field, the solar cycles, astronomy, everybody that's devoutly a follower of their own, whatever it is, their doctrines, they know that they believe and they feel that the moon and the sun and all these terrestrial magnetics all affect them, or terrestrial mechanics affect them in different ways, and they look to the stars, they look to their horoscopes, they look to these things to guide them. And there's research in here as well showing the effects of electromagnetics on the biological and reproductive cycles. That's, in some cases, they were able to make people shift from the natural, spring and summer and all that stuff, and just sort of start following the cycle of the pulse and the waves and all these other things. And it would be, I don't know, it would be dumb to just ignore all this stuff and say that it's not true and it's part of some guy's, paranoid conspiracy idea and things like that. So I would always encourage you to do your own research, and I've shown you some pretty good resources. So again, if you want to search somebody's Twitter field, just do that. You just do @ their name, and then you type in whatever word you want to look at. So I'll do it again here. And that would show you all the different tweets that I have referenced the word CIA. Something that I'm actually a little bit more familiar with would be the English research that I've done. So all of the tweets that I've put the word English in, this stuff even here that I'm showing is from John Dee, who was known as a sorcerer or magician and cryptographer and all these things, but he was basically working with ESP and telepathy as well, and you can decode all that stuff from his work once you get into it. and the 1 and the 0, some of that stuff that I've alluded to in one of my other videos, but it's clear that the line and the circle are basically the tool of every philosophical notion we have, as well as our numeric system and things like that. But all of it in some fashion or another comes back to the awakening, the Christic, or the soul, the spirit, the ascension. It's all, whatever term you're using, it doesn't matter. They all fall under the same things. So yeah, the Twitter field, and then of course the CIA's Freedom of Information database. Check it out. There's a lot of stuff to find. I would suggest doing, if you're interested in something. I don't know how large the database is in total. I know it spans pretty far. There's a 25-year archive program, but that's said that now for 3 years, so I don't know what that actually denotes specifically. But there's a lot of papers. I mean, you could even, if you want to look up maritime law in Russia, right, or China, or Morocco, and you want to just look up what the maritime laws are, there's a ton of stuff that you could glean from this website that's not related to any of these things. But if you're interested in the occult and telepathy and ESP and 5G and vaccines and ionization and weather modification and all that stuff, I would come here as well and do parallel research as well. And you're going to find a lot of, like, there's even light healing, right? Like, there's a couple guys in here that still have companies now, actually, and you could find them online. But some of the scientists and researchers on here figured out how to use specific lights, red lights and purple lights and green lights and yellow lights and white lights and all that stuff, interestingly corresponding with the chakras, of course, which does go into another occult aspect of knowledge, but I don't want to keep going tangential here. But they have healing machines with light, just specific light bulbs that we use all day versus the light bulbs that you find in offices and things like that. It's a lot of profound research, and it doesn't require you to be an initiate or a part of a secret fraternity to discover. And with that, I'm going to cut this short here and end this now. All right, everyone, have a good day, good night, or good evening.